starting in 5 seconds. Let me begin by extending sincere congratulations to the Prime Minister of Bangladesh, Her Excellency Begum Khaleda Zia, on her election as chairperson of SARC. I also express my heartfelt appreciation to the government and people of Bangladesh for the excellent arrangements made for this historic summit. We have been overwhelmed by the warm and friendly hospitality extended to us since our arrival in Dhaka. I would also like to take this opportunity to express our sincere appreciation to the immediate past chair Pakistan for the unfailing commitment and zeal with which it pursued the revival of the SARC process. Our region has seen intense suffering caused by major natural disasters this year. Sri Lanka, Maldives, and India were victims of the tsunami in the early part of the year, and now Pakistan and India have suffered from a major earthquake which has wiped out entire towns and villages. We grieve for our citizens and fellow South Asians who lost their lives and resolve to continue to help others affected rebuild their lives. These disasters once again remind us of the need for forging even closer ties to enable us to pool our collective resources to deal with such calamities. This summit should evolve regional mechanisms for effective and timely cooperation in disaster relief and management. We have extended modest help to our neighbors in a spirit of solidarity and are prepared to do more. We are glad that India's offer to host the SARC Center for Disaster Preparedness has been accepted. Disaster management is an issue whose urgency compels us to address it with seriousness of purpose. The possibilities for meaningful cooperation range from early warning systems to relief and construction. It is incumbent on us to do more in this area, drawing on existing experience in South Asia. For instance, I understand Bangladesh has developed innovative approaches for reducing the impact of disasters through community involvement in planning and risk management. The use of microcredit, both for pre disaster risk reduction and for post disaster reconstruction and rehabilitation, are cited as global best practices that are worthy of replication in other countries of South Asia. SARC is entering the 20th year of its existence. It was in this very city that we began our journey towards a shared goal. The vision of President helped move forward the idea of SARC, and it is only appropriate that we honor his memory at this summit with the first SARC award. At this point in SARC's journey, it is fair to ask whether in these 20 years we have done justice to that initial blueprint of for regional cooperation. The honest answer is that regional economic cooperation in South Asia has fallen far short of our expectations. It remains far behind the more successful examples in both Asia and other regions of the world. I sincerely hope that SAFTA comes into force by January 1, 2006, but even this will represent only a modest beginning in terms of our goal for regional economic integration. It is important that we assess South Asia regional cooperation in the larger Asian context. Today, ASEAN is evolving rapidly and a truly integrated economic community. Parallel to this intra Asian integration is the broader movement towards economic integration in the context of the proposed East Asian Economic Summit. We are clearly witnessing nothing short of an Asian resurgence based upon the rebuilding of the pre colonial arteries of trade and commerce that created a distinct Asian identity in the first place. My question is SARC prepared to be an integral part of this emerging Asian resurgence, or is it content to remain marginalized at its periphery? If our region wishes to be a part of the dynamic Asia which is emerging in our neighborhood, then we must act and act speedily. It is our location at the crossroads of Asia that gave our subcontinent its unique civilizational attributes, the assimilative traditions in our culture, the adaptability of our people, and a boundless creativity that arises from a constant interplay of ideas. If SARC as a region has to recapture its role as a crossroads of culture and commerce, how much more necessary is it for us to remove the barriers to the free flow of goods, of peoples, and ideas within our own region? We cannot be the crossroads of Asia but remains disconnected within our own region. Without the latter, the former is not possible, or at least will be possible to a very limited extent. Ancient roads crisscross the subcontinent and link up with the seaports that were the gateways to the rest of the world. Our rivers form the waterways over which people and cargo traveled across the region, but those has not been developed. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, as we look at our imports, which have increased by 9 to 10 times of our exports, we find that the major elements which have led to this shooting up of our imports have been first crude oil and petroleum products, which occupy now 70% of our imports. Mr. Finance Minister in the Associated Chambers of Commerce meeting yesterday gave the figure of 72%, and he said that we must plan to bring it down to 60%. So the major components of our huge import bill are first the petroleum products and crude oil, and second the group of other items of maintenance such as fertilizers, edible oils, cements, etc. Now, Mr. Vice Chairman, my fourth point is that the import policy which has been announced in this house does not deal with the main elements. These two groups of elements, namely crude oil and petroleum products and fertilizers, edible oils and cement, which are causing this huge deficit. We have got a good import policy, but it has nothing to do with the elements which are causing the main mischief in our trade balance. Let me summarize or recall what has been stated in our new import policy. The new import policy removed 160 items from the open journal license. It has shifted 42 from the restricted to the banned list, and it has placed 63 new items under the open journal license. Now, if I am not mistaken, Mr. Vice Chairman, this import policy will reduce our imports this year from that of last year by rupees 100 crores. Now, this rupees 100 crores reduction of our imports by this new import policy is about 0.8% of our total import bill. That is all that our import policy does, because the new import policy has nothing to do, as I said, with the two major elements causing the import bill to go up, namely crude oil and petroleum products and fertilizers, edible oils and cement. Now, may I say that with rupees 100 crores reduction, the new import policy is going to economize on the import bill for the next year is not likely to be on account of the import bill on items other than petrol, etc. If the finance minister is right, if the government is right, and the president's address is right, there is going to be an upsurge of 10% in industrial development. If investments and industries pick up, this import policy will not lead to any economy. A rupees 100 crores reduction in imports will not come about. Therefore, I leave this point by saying that the import policy of the government is good and is necessary for what I call non-important items that we need to have outside the import policy. Therefore, I want to plead in the House with the government for a national energy policy. Mr. Vice Chairman, I am one of the economists who has studied the energy problem and published a possible national policy under which there can be at least 25% economy in the next year in our use of crude and petroleum products. It is not that the time to go into them, and it does not apply to the Ministry of Commerce, but the deficits in our imports, which are primarily due to the deficits in import of crude oil, for a national energy policy which is urgently needed. Once again, would plead for this, as this is one of the means of getting our imports in some sort of in line of the means of getting our imports in some sort of in line with our exports. As far as fertilizers, edible oils and cements are concerned, I do not see any reason why we are continually these large and increasing imports of these items instead of utilizing the existing capacity of our units fully. The story of capacity utilization in fertilizers and cement companies for the last year makes sad reading. Therefore, outside the import policy, the government needs to take action on these two groups of items, the crude oil and petroleum, and the fertilizer, the edible oils and cement, to make us more self reliant and self sufficient in our production as one of the means of having our imports in line with our exports. My fourth comment, Mr. Vice Chairman, is with regard to our exports. We have planned in the seventh plan for exports amounting to rupees 9800 crores, and the new policy which has been set forth comprises of more items placed under open journal license, controls on a large number of units removed, 12 items added to the banned list, making a total of 71 items, and 3 items decanalized also. This gradual taking away of controls shall help the industry to grow in the right direction as envisaged in the budget. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, I would like to draw attention to some aspects of the export policy and the strategy. We all know that our exportable surplus is only a very small part of our gross national product, roughly of the order of 5 to 6%. We know, however, that international trade, foreign trade, is a function of international interdependence. No doubt, basically, we produce for our own consumption, but whatever a natural advantage we have, we naturally have to tap it to build exportable surpluses so that then we can earn the necessary foreign exchange for meeting our essential requirements. The essential policy that we have followed is correct. I see nothing wrong to fight against. The policy of export promotion and import substitution must remain our policy, but it seems in actual implementation we have failed in on both fronts. Our share of the world trade has come down from roughly 1% about 2 decades ago to less than half a percent in 1984. We remain primarily an exporter of primary products despite all the noise we make about non traditional items. Tea, jute, iron ore, rice, spices, cashew nuts are our mainstay, and we have probably the only exception among the major items, textiles, leather, if you call it an industrial product. We hear so much about engineering goods. Our export of engineering goods accounts for 0.1% of the total world fair trade in engineering exports. 20 years after we made our first engineering export to the United States sometime in 1977. I think this needs to be improved. I have therefore a few suggestions to make. I feel that our markets must be diversified, and so should be our sources of supply. We should think of markets nearer home in our close vicinity in Africa, West Asia, and Southeast Asia. And one way of doing it will be to build mutually beneficial relationships, ties of interdependence. Secondly, there are a number of items in which greater efforts has to be put in order to organize the producers and exporters. I do not want to say combines in associations, and I think a little bit of a beginning was made in the case of jute. We can do a better collective bargaining with our buyers, and we can have more favorable terms of trade, better international marketing than we are having today. Thirdly, we have to add naturally to our value adding capacity from iron or we are going to pelletization. But why cannot we go to iron and steel? After all, for a country of our dimensions and resources, 5 to 6 million tons of steel is peanuts. I just mentioned leather. From leather, we have moved on to leather goods to shoes, etc. We must diversify our exports because if we want to have a non operational market for non traditional goods, we have to adopt a policy of natural self denial. You cannot run foreign trade in terms of red and green signals. You cannot run foreign trade in terms of off again and on again principle. If you want to cultivate a foreign market, you have to service it. You have to see it that we do not fail when there is scarcity, but we have also to see that we do not fail internally as well as externally. For this, we have to build up buffer stocks. Mr. Vice Chairman, I know that the Commerce Minister will say, yes, all these needs to be done. I can do a very good job of buying and selling, but where are the things to sell? Therefore, surely production comes first, production, both primary and secondary. The constraints coming in the way of production have got to be removed so that the installed capacity can be fully utilized. And as my distinguished colleague has said, productivity has to be improved. For that, what is required is to beef up your infrastructure. There are transport bottlenecks in both rail and road. There are ports which simply cannot handle our import and export trade. There are ports which foreign liners refuse to touch because the turnaround period is so high. I know shipping is a problem. There are many reasons with which we do not have direct shipping. There is always the problem of whether you first develop your export trade and then establish a shipping link, or first have the shipping link and then develop export trade. There is also the question of adequate banking and insurance facilities with a number of developing countries. We do not have such facilities. Such facilities have been by and large monopolized by the developed countries. Finally, at home, we ought to have better market intelligence and better communication facilities, and perhaps more efficient methods of customs inspection. These are some of the other bottlenecks. I would like the Commerce Minister to fight against these bottlenecks and all other constraints and fight against some of his colleagues here to have them removed. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, I rise to support the bill brought forward by the Honorable Deputy Minister of the Ministry of Finance. Banking is a service of vital importance to industry, commerce, and agriculture. It is concerned with the creation of credit money and its distribution between various users such as industry and agriculture or between institutions and individuals. In fact, the smooth working of a modern economy depends on the proper regulation of credit with which the banks are concerned. The question, therefore, of recruitment of the personnel of banking institutions assumes great importance. The Banking Commission had recommended the establishment of such a commission in its report in 1985. In fact, government have been rather late in bringing forward this very important and necessary piece of legislation. Before nationalization, some of the big commercial banks had made some arrangements of their own for recruitment of their staff. The Institute of Bank Management and the Reserve Bank of India, through the Bankers Training College, run some short term and long term courses for recruitment and training of bank staff. But these arrangements are not adequate even to meet the requirements for recruitment of higher cadres. The largest proportion of banks staff consists of clerks and cashiers. The recruitment policies followed by most of the Indian banks before nationalization were not based on either scientific lines. In several cases, even minimum qualifications were not insisted upon. The Banking Commission has reported that in many cases, people who had not even passed matriculation examination were recruited at clerk. There was no proper evaluation of the aptitude or capacity, and very often caste and relationship determined the choice of candidates. Lack of training facilities, however, aggravated the problem, and banks found themselves with staff which had neither aptitude nor ability to carry out the jobs assigned to them. The bill, therefore, is welcome. It seeks to provide for proper methods of selection for recruitment. It provides for the establishment of a body corporate to be called the Banking Service Commission. It shall be the duty of the Commission to hold competitive examinations to recruit people for clerical and allied cadres, junior officers, cadres, and such other officers, cadre, as the central government may by notification specify. It shall consist of a chairman and 8 persons who, in the view of the government, are men of integrity, ability, and have experience of finance and business administration. The bill rightly attaches great importance to selection of people for the clerical cadre because the clerical staff constitute the largest proportion of the total manpower, and it is they who rendered the banking service to the people. Rapid expansion of banking ensures further that many of them will soon get promotion to the officers cadre. It has been emanated that every clerk can hope to reach the officer's level in 10 or 12 years' time. Every clerk is therefore a potential officer, but to be effective, recruitment should attempt to attract appropriate skills and attitude, and search for suitable talent should not be restricted to the first point of entry in the banks at the clerical level. It should also be extended to attract sufficient number of persons who possesses executive skill. With the functional enlargement of the banks, they require the service of experts such as agricultural scientists and those who are experts in engineering. Recruitment of such personnel should also be considered by the Banking Commission. A provision in the bill enables the government to increase the proportion of such junior staff from 25% to 33%. In my view, it is a welcome provision. There is a provision that a certain percentage shall be reserved for scheduled caste and scheduled tribes. This percentage has to be determined according to the journal principles and also the requirements of the banks. One provision says that the commission will have certain advisory functions. It is an important provision. We know how in government service very difficult problems of promotion and seniority arise. It is better that they are solved by a third body rather than the superior officers who have sometimes prejudices against people working under them. I hope this provision will be used for that purpose. I will not take any more time of the House by dilating on the details of the bill. I hope the honorable members will accept the basic idea behind the bill. The establishment of a commission on the lines envisaged will impart objectivity and impartiality in the recruitment procedures of the banks by prescribing uniform qualifications and eligibility standards applicable in all public sector banks, and thereby help to tap the right type of persons for the banking industry. Finally, there is a last clause which says that the government may extend the provisions of this bill to other banks. If the Banking Service Commission could cover the requirements of other commercial banks also, so much the better. We will have uniform standards for recruitment of personnel in all the banks. With these words, I support the bill. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, the basis of the bill has also been questioned, that is whether the restructuring of the capital of the institutions is at all needed. It is our view that a developmental agency should be organizationally independent and its board professionalized, having fully fed the Industrial Development Bank of India since its infancy. For a decade, the Reserve Bank has placed it in a position of importance. The government have therefore taken the view that the time has arrived to elevate the status of the development bank to that of the principal financial institution. Just as the Reserve Bank is the central bank of the country, the Life Insurance Corporation of India is the principal investment institution. The development bank should achieve the status of the principal financial institution, all the three being directly owned by the government. The bill seeks to achieve this purpose. Further, the board of the principal financial institution should reflect the various impulses of different states of India, particularly those which are industrially backward. As I have already explained, you will see from clause 6 of the bill that in a board of 23 members, excepting two who are government officials and two employees of the financial institutions, the rest are professionals in the sense that they represent all India and state level financial institutions, banks, and various fields like science, technology, industry, economics, industrial, cooperative, marketing, etc. The Reserve Bank, as the central bank of the country, will be represented at the level of a deputy governor on the board and on the executive committee of the development bank. The Reserve Bank is therefore in a position to continue to make its positive contribution to the operations of the development bank and through it of all the other financial institutions. It has also been argued that after the restructuring of the development bank, neither the volume of credit to industry will increase nor will the cost of credit decrease, and thus there is no economic rationales for the bill. In any event, the mobilization of resources and their channeling will be done in close coordination with the Reserve Bank. Having elevated the status of the IDBI and made it statutorily responsible for the coordination, the development bank and the other financial institutions will work with greater cohesion, and to that extent there will be better development of resources all round. A point has also been raised that with the transfer of the shareholding of the Industrial Development Bank of India from the Reserve Bank to the government, large industrial group would have easier access to institutional finance than before. In the second note of dissent by my honorable friends, similar point has been made about the credit policies to be followed by the IDBI. Loans have not been defined. The policy of financing industry, including small scale industry, cooperatives, etc., and the large industrial group, is determined by government. For implementing the policy of government, it is perhaps not very material whether the Industrial Development Bank of India is directly owned by government or owned through the Reserve Bank. Parliament has therefore the opportunity to oversee the policy being followed by the development bank and the other institutions in financing industry in general and the larger industrial groups in particular. The honorable member have in their minute of dissent referred to the position that the employees' representatives will not be elected on the board but will be selected in a manner prescribed by government. They have referred to the practice prevailing in regard to the appointment of directors on the boards of the nationalized banks. I may inform the House that in the case of the nationalized banks, the scheme framed under the Banking Nationalization Act does not provide as such for a direct election by workmen or their representatives on the boards of the banks, and a representative is chosen out of a panel of three names suggested by the Federation, which on verification by the Central Labor Commissioner has the largest number of workmen as members. A more or less similar procedure will be drawn up in this case also for selection of the employees' representatives. I now take this opportunity of paying a tribute to the services rendered by the Reserve Bank of India in feeding the Industrial Development Bank of India from its infancy and having brought it up to its present status so that it could take up the leadership of the other financial institutions independently. As I have already stated earlier, the Industrial Development Bank of India will continue to be as much as concern of the Reserve Bank as of the government in the new setup as well. I have every hope that the Development Bank, as the principal financial institution in the field of industrial finance, with its enlarged role, should be able to play an effective part in the balanced industrial development of the country in accordance with national priority and aspirations. This has been provided in the preamble by the Joint Committee constituted for that purpose. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Sir, with regard to this banking laws, there is much to be said. After the nationalization of banks, several issues have cropped up. Here, the government proposes certain amendments, out of which some are necessary, but I would like to draw the attention of the Honorable Minister to the Banking Laws Bill 70 of 1983, in which there is a proposal for prohibition of the acceptance of deposits by unincorporated bodies. About this, I would like to stress this point because society has its structure in this country. There are certain money lenders who are rendering some service to the people. Your branches have not reached there. That entire structure or infrastructure, whatever you name it, is not there. Because of that, sheriff associations have made representation to the government on the way in which you are stopping this thing. If we say you can collect deposits from the 10 people only, then this entire thing will come to a standstill. Your other amendments I support, but as far as this thing is concerned, I would like the government to think the basic objective, which is difficult to understand and much less to appreciate, of this underlying objective behind the introduction of the bill, and more particularly The amendment mentioned above, which is likely to have a far reaching effect on various sectors of the economy if the government is determined to protect and promote the interest of the depositors or root out malpractices on the part of certain elements in the informal credit market, then there are various ways and means by which these aims could be achieved. It is apprehended that such a drastic measure will result in squeezing the source of credit in the informal credit market, which will not only paralyze the normal course of conduct of business in the urban and rural areas but also provide wide scope for unhealthy and undesirable practice, a situation which can hardly be viewed with calm. We humbly feel that rigorous restrictions on acceptance of deposits by the unincorporated bodies has also draconian measures to control them would only cause serious damage to the economy, resulting in hardship to millions of people without any commensurate benefit to anybody. Now, sir, this is the representation that they have made since all the branches of our nationalized banks have not reached the rural areas in the far flung areas. What would happen to those people? Sir, having stated this, these people had approached me in Bombay. Then, sir, all the staff associations are already agitated over it. Now, I have got a memorandum which I think has been submitted to the government also. It is Gujarat State Shroff Association. Likewise, that agitation has spread everywhere, and there is an apprehension that if the government goes on with this provision, then the entire transactions which are being carried on smoothly at places where no banking facilities is available will come to a stop and stand still, and the rural people and the lower middle class people will be very much affected. Now they have stated the reason why it is an unjustified move and what is the magnitude of the problem. There are certain implications on vital sectors. The move will be an obstruction to informal credit structure. It will be a death blow to distributive trade. It will have a detrimental effect on rural sector. Then it has mentioned that it will have a crippling impact on indigenous banking. It will aggravate unemployment. There are certain drastic panel provisions about which also they have stated. They have mentioned about the erosion of moral values also. Well, sir, we may keep it aside. We all should be very much concerned with the moral values also. Now, it has a far reaching impact. They have stated all this in their memorandum. I would only like to highlight one or two main points. It has to be realized that the informal credit structure comprising of trade, business, commission, agents, and indigenous bankers has been rendering valuable services since times immemorial to various sectors of the society, and more particularly in rural and semi urban areas. What is more, they occupied a place of pride due to personalized service to both clients and depositors, coupled with high efficiency and prompt service at low overhead cost. Even though greater percentage of information credit structure is unsecured vis-a-vis the bank credit, which is mostly secured, the default is very low. Despite substantial expansion of bank branches, not only of the nationalized banks but also the national rural banks and the cooperative banks, the informal credit market continues to serve the increasing needs of the internal trade, industry, and commerce of the country, which highlight its viability and indispensability even in developed countries like USA. Informal and non-banking commercial credit markets operate without being subjected to close customary and legal regulation characteristic of commercial banking and its variants. In such circumstances, instead of destroying such informal credit structure, it would be quite useful to revitalize and reinvigorate it. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. I am grateful to the Board of Governors, Directors, and members of the staff of this Institute of Technology for having invited me to perform the opening ceremony of the building of the Institute this evening. Being a teacher myself, it is always an encouraging and stimulating experience for me to meet young men and women, students and teachers who are engaged in the exciting pursuit of knowledge and discovery. It makes me feel happier and younger. I shall always carry with me the fragrant memory of the pleasant time I have spent in your midst this evening. I have been impressed by the considerable thought and hard work that has gone into the design and construction of this building, which I have had the pleasure to inaugurate. It had beauty without pomp and show and is eminently functional. It is designed to meet all the present requirements of the institute and also to provide for further expansion without upsetting the journal pattern. Its cost has been kept significantly low and the speed and efficiency with which it has been constructed deserve admiration. I was also happy to learn that most of the execution has been done departmentally without any contractors. In the present position of our resources, we cannot spend heavily on buildings, much less on middlemen's profit or ornamental features which have little educational significance. I therefore welcome the emphasis laid in the planning and construction of this building on functional utility, simplicity, and economy. I wish we could carry this emphasis still further in all our future constructions. The development of modern industry has been one of our significant achievements in the post independence period. We have started several new industries and expanded older ones, and this has enabled us to reduce imports to meet increased internal demands and to promote exports in certain sectors. In this, as well as in building up of the defense potential, our programs for the development of technical education have made a significant contribution. In spite of the heavy weather into which these plants have recently run owing to a period of recession through which we are passing, I regard them as one of the more successful areas of our educational planning. In the last 20 years, we have expanded most of the old engineering colleges because a bigger institution tends to be more economic and efficient, and also opened new engineering colleges. In the development of higher education, the essence of the strategy lies in creating through concentration of human and material resources a few centers of excellence where the highest standards possible are maintained. These centers are then utilized for producing high quality teachers, textbooks, and other materials, which in their turn help to extend the excellence generated in these institutions to others and ultimately to raise the standards of the system as a whole. The establishment of the Indian Institute of Technology is a good illustration of this process of improving standards in higher education. It has yielded good results so far, and if persisted on proper lines, it will eventually crown our efforts with success and help us to raise the standards of the entire system of technical education. I wish such programs could be developed in other sectors of higher education as well. While I greatly appreciate these attempts at improving quality, we have to be on guard against two dangers. The first is to ensure that this pursuit of quality does not push up the cost to impossible levels. I concede the point that good education cannot be had without a cost, and that a nation which desires to have good education should also be prepared to pay for it. But research studies have shown that the converse of this statement is not necessarily true. Very often, institutions where the cost per student is high show a poorer level of attainment than some others where the cost per student is much lower. It cannot, therefore, always be argued that an education which costs more is necessarily better. What often happens in practice is that cost of education mount up for reasons other than those of qualitative improvement, snobbery, lack of proper planning, or the adoption of obsolete technique. Good scientific research, for instance, cost more money, but larger amounts can also be spent on providing marble floors to laboratories or on the purchase of costly equipment which is only occasionally utilized. We have to ensure that such causes of increase in cost are avoided and that cost per student are reduced to the minimum possible consistent with the maintenance of the necessary standards. This will be possible through the adoption of modern scientific techniques, better planning, and greater human effort. The institutes should not be satisfied merely by maintaining the highest standards. They should also evolve techniques to avoid waste, to make the best use of all available facilities, and to reduce cost to as low a level as possible. This is an important aspect of the problem which I commend for your serious consideration. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. Mr. Chairman, sir, I am grateful to you for giving me an opportunity to participate in the discussion and the report of the University Grants Commission for the year 1998-99. On behalf of my party, I would like to express my views on this report of the UGC. At the outset, I would like to raise certain positives. 51 years after achieving our independence, what do we witness in the field of education? Has our educational policy enabled us to solve the manifold miseries of our masses? Has our educational policy created additional job opportunities in the country? Unfortunately, to our dismay, we find that we have not made any appreciable progress in education. In fact, I should say that we are slipping back into primitive period. So far, education has been confined to bulky books, and the educated youths have not proved useful to the society. What is their contribution to the evolution of modern society in our country? Sir, it has become a matter of dispute and discussion. The graduates are groping in the dark. Their education has proved futile to the needs of the nation. They have not been able to contribute substantially to the social, cultural, and economic growth of our country. The utility of higher education in India lies in its utter futility. I would like to emphasize that education should be a potent instrument for bringing out the latent talents of the young birds of humanity for the very survival of human society. In this background, we should have a look at the 1997-98 report of the University Grants Commission. Even a superficial scrutiny shows that there has been inequitable distribution of grants among the universities in our country. You know, sir, that there are 105 universities in our country, out of which 7 are under the control of the central government, called the central universities. Out of the total amount of rupees 50 crores available at the disposal of the UGC, 5 central universities were given a sum of rupees 19.20 crores in this year. The remaining 100 universities were to remain content with the balance of rupees 30.8 crores. I would like to know why such a step motherly approach should have been adopted here. So we go about talking that India is an agricultural country and agriculture contributes 70% of the national income. It is indisputable that the majority of our people are dependent upon agriculture for their livelihood. Yet, we have done very little for the progress of agricultural education in our country. I have to painfully point out that in the existing scheme of things, lion's share of money is allocated to educational institutions imparting arts and science education, and agricultural education is to rest content with no share. I have to say that in all the 5 years plan that have gone by, agricultural education received very scant attention in the hands of our government. The agricultural universities are the distant cousin of the UGC. I am constrained to quote from page 150 of the UGC report for 1997-98, which shows that the agricultural universities in Tamil Nadu got a sum of rupees 20,000 as plan allocation. I hope that at least in the coming years the present government would give the prime of place for agricultural education and allocate adequate funds for agricultural universities, enabling them to produce agricultural graduates and scientists who can take agriculture to the commanding heights of our economy. I have to regretfully point out that paltry sums were spent during this year for library books and scientific equipment for laboratories. You cannot contradict me if I say that educational standards would be only below par in colleges which do not have good libraries and laboratories. In 1997-98, a sum of rupees 2.45 crores was allocated for library books and rupees 4 crores for scientific equipments. As library and laboratory are the essential ingredients of higher education, the UGC should not be stingy in allocating funds for this purpose. I would like to recall that the father of the nation, Mahatma Gandhi, and our late revered leader used to emphasize repeatedly the necessity of teaching the young and the youth of the country in mother tongue. Even after 5 decades of our independence, we do not have textbooks for higher education in mother tongues. Consequently, the standard of education has gone down steeply. It is of paramount importance that textbooks for higher education must be brought out in mother tongues. Here, the UGC has a vital role to play. Sir, the universities alone can be entrusted with this wondrous task of bringing out collegiate textbooks in regional languages, and no other body can do. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. I am glad to welcome you to the first meeting of the University Grants Commission in accordance with one of the recommendation of the Central Advisory Board of Education. The Government of India decided in 1945 to set up a University Grants Committee. The functions of this committee were confined to the three central universities, and it was only an advisory body. There were several non officials who were members, but they acted on a part-time basis, and there was only one whole-time officer who acted as secretary for the committee. With this limited personnel and the circumscribed powers, it was not surprising that the University Grants Committee was not able to make any effective contribution to the development of university education. In 1947, the committee was reconstituted with somewhat enlarged membership, but since the function and the official assistance remained more or less the same, this committee also did not prove effective. In 1952, the Government of India therefore decided to set up a reconstituted University Grants Commission with a full time chairman and full time secretary and with enlarged membership. It was intended that this commission should look mainly after the four central universities and be entrusted with the following functions: 1. To advise the government on the allocation of grants in aid from public funds to the central universities; 2. To advise the government on the allocation of grants in aid to other universities and institutions of higher learning whose case for such grants may be referred to the commission by the government; and 3. To advise the universities and other institutions of higher learning in respect of any question referred by the government to the commission. After the passing of the constitution, the central government was entrusted with an important responsibility in higher education in respect of the coordination of facilities and the maintenance of standards in the universities. The government considered various measures for the discharge of this responsibility and came to the conclusion that it could be best fulfilled by the establishment of a Council of University Education by an Act of Parliament. A draft bill to set up a Council of Universities Education was accordingly prepared and circulated to the universities in order to secure the largest possible support and cooperation from them. The draft bill was considered by the Inter-University Board, which agreed with the objects of the bill as such. The government accepted this recommendation as it itself felt that a properly constituted University Grants Commission with enlarged powers and functions could discharge these duties more effectively. This also appeared to be in consonance with the recommendations of the University Education Commission. In its report, the Commission had recommended that a University Grants Commission on the lines of the University Grants Committee in Great Britain should be set up as early as possible. The Scientific Manpower Committee had also recommended the provision of generous grants for the development of postgraduate facilities in the universities. The government had accepted these recommendations in principle, but on account of financial stringency, no action could be taken on them at the time. After the acceptance of the 5-year plan, it was known that some funds had been provided for the improvement of university education, and the Ministry of Education considered the time appropriate for the establishment of a University Grants Commission. Further discussions have been held by the government to increase the quantum of these funds, particularly in view of the fact that the University Grants Commission would have to deal not merely with the four central universities but all the universities of India. I am happy to announce that we are now in a position to establish a statutory University Grants Commission with larger funds to look after all universities, and this commission will also serve as an instrument of university reform. A draft bill has been prepared, and it is hoped that this will be presented to Parliament at all an early date. The consideration of the bill by Parliament and its enactment is likely to take some time. The government, however, felt that in view of the growing problems of the universities, immediate action was needed. It has therefore considered it desirable to set up a University Grants Commission in accordance with the resolution of November last and allow it to start functioning immediately. This commission will consist of 5 members and have one person as chairman in order to ensure that the universities do not look upon it as an external body. It has been decided to associate a number of vice chancellors with it. I am sure you will all agree that this is a momentous decision and will have far reaching influence on the development of university education in India. I therefore want that the importance of this step and the result which we hope to attain through this commission should be properly appreciated by the people at large. The first thing I want to make clear is that the commission will be fully free and work independently. Stop. Starting in 5 seconds. The fiscal year now drawing to a close has been a difficult one by any standards. It has been a year of crisis and of crisis management. It has also been a year of great economic challenges and bold new initiatives. When the new government assumed office 8 months ago, we inherited an economy on the verge of collapse, inflation accelerating rapidly, the balance of payments was in serious trouble, the foreign exchange reserves were barely enough for 2 weeks of imports, foreign commercial bank shed stopped lending to India, non-resident Indians were withdrawing their deposits. Shortages of foreign exchange had forced a massive import squeeze which had halted the rapid industrial growth of earlier years and had produced negative growth rates from May 1991 onwards. Our first and immediate challenge was to arrest the slide and restore India's credibility both domestically and in the eyes of the world. To achieve this objective, we had to make immediate measures to avoid a default in international payments and also take steps to restore macroeconomics balance in the economy in the short run with a view to controlling inflation and reducing the balance of payments deficit to a manageable level. Our medium term objective was to place the economic back on the path of high and sustainable growth. The new government took several initiatives in pursuit of these objectives. We took emergency measures to prevent a default in external payments, which would have been highly disruptive. The previous government had already decided to use a part of the gold held by the Reserve Bank of India to mobilize temporary liquidity abroad. We did not consider it prudent to reverse this decision, but we promised to redeem the gold at the earliest opportunity, and we have kept our word. We began the process of restoring macroeconomic balance by seeking to reduce the fiscal deficit, which had grown very large in the previous year. We also embarked on a medium term program of structural reform, including new initiatives in trade policy and industrial policy aimed at improving the efficiency, productivity, and international competitiveness of Indian industry. Our longer term objective is to evolve a pattern of production which is labor intensive and generates larger employment opportunities in productive higher income jobs and reduces the disparities in income and wealth between rural and urban areas, which is very much essential now. Stabilization and structural adjustment are never painless or quick, especially when we are dealing with imbalances and structural rigidity which have built up over several years to bring the economy back to a path of rapid and sustainable growth. A firm commitment to austerity, the pursuit of excellence, and the promotion of efficiency and productivity for the benefit of the common people has to be an integral part of this effort. Given our limited resources, our people cannot afford to copy the soulless consumerism and the wasteful lifestyles of the affluent countries of the West. Conspicuous consumption has to be actively discharged. The virtues of thrift have to be emphasized. The honors of wealth, as Gandhiji used to say, must learn to regard themselves as trustees of society. We cannot postpone structural reform and adjustment, but we must ensure that the burden of adjustment on the poorer and weaker sections of our society is reduced to the maximum possible extent. We are traveling through difficult and uncharted terrain where no action is without attendant risk, and success will not always be immediate. We need patience, perseverance, and national cohesion if we are to succeed. It has been alleged by some people that the reform program has been dictated by the IMF and the World Bank. We are founder members of these two institutions, and it is our right to borrow from them when we need assistance in support of our programs. As lenders, they are required satisfy themselves about our capacity to repay loans, and this is where conditionality comes into the picture. All borrowing countries hold discussions with these institutions on the viability of the programs of which assistance is sought. We have also held such discussions. The extent of conditionality depends on the amount and the type of assistance sought. However, I wish to state categorically that the conditions we have accepted reflect no more than the implementation of the reform program as outlined by letters of intent sent to the IMF and the World Bank and are wholly consistent with our national interest. The bulk of the reform program is based on the election manifesto of our party. There is no question of the government ever compromising our national interest of our policies will take time to materialize. I am happy to report to the House that we have made substantial progress even in this short space of 8 months, restoring India's credibility and pulling the economic back from the slide into financial chaos. Stop.